The Face of Helen. Mr. Satterthwaite was at the opera and sat alone in his big box on the first tier. Outside the door was a printed card bearing his name. An appreciator and a connoisseur of all the arts, Mr. Satterthwaite was especially fond of good music and was a regular subscriber to Covent Garden every year, reserving a box for Tuesdays and Fridays throughout the season. But it was not often that he sat in it alone. He was a gregarious little gentleman, and he liked filling his box with the elite of the great world to which he belonged, and also with the aristocracy of the artistic world in which he was equally at home. He was alone tonight because a countess had disappointed him. The countess, besides being a beautiful and celebrated woman, was also a good mother. Her children had been attacked by that common and distressing disease, the mumps, and the countess remained at home in tearful confabulation with exquisitely starched nurses. Her husband, who had supplied her with the aforementioned children and a title, but who was otherwise a complete nonentity, had seized at the chance to escape. Nothing bored him more than music. So Mr. Satterthwaite sat alone. Cavalleria Rusticana and Pagliacci were being given that night, and since the first had never appealed to him, he arrived just after the curtain went down, on Santuza's death agony, in time to glance round the house with practiced eyes. Before everyone streamed out, bent on paying visits or fighting for coffee or lemonade. Mr. Satterthwaite adjusted his opera glasses, looked round the house, marked down his prey and sallied forth with a well-mapped-out plan of campaign ahead of him. A plan, however, which he did not put into execution, for just outside his box he cannonied into a tall dark man and recognized him with a pleasurable thrill of excitement. "Mr. Quin," cried Mr. Satterthwaite. He seized his friend warmly by the hand, clutching him as though he feared any minute to see him vanish into thin air. "You must share my box," said Mr. Satterthwaite determinedly. "You are not with a party?" "No, I am sitting by myself in the stalls," responded Mr. Quin with a smile. "Then, that is settled," said Mr. Satterthwaite with a sigh of relief. His manner was almost comic, had there been anyone to observe it. "You are very kind," said Mr. Quin. "Not at all. It is a pleasure. I didn't know you were fond of music. There are reasons why I am attracted to Pagliacci." "Ah, of course," said Mr. Satterthwaite, nodding sapiently, though, if put to it, he would have found it hard to explain just why he had used that expression. "Of course, you would be." They went back to the box at the first summons of the bell, and leaning over the front of it, they watched the people returning to the stalls. "That's a beautiful head," observed Mr. Satterthwaite suddenly. He indicated with his glasses a spot immediately beneath them in the stall's circle. A girl sat there whose face they could not see, only the pure gold of her hair that fitted with the closeness of a cap till it merged into the white neck. "A Greek head," said Mr. Satterthwaite reverently. "Pure Greek." He sighed happily. "It's a remarkable thing when you come to think of it, how very few people have hair that fits them. It's more noticeable now that everyone is shingled." "You are so observant," said Mr. Quin. "I see things," admitted Mr. Satterthwaite. "I do see things. For instance, I picked out that head at once. We must have a look at her face sooner or later. But it won't match, I'm sure. That would be a chance in 1,000. Almost as the words left his lips, the lights flickered and went down, the sharp rap of the conductor's baton was heard, and the opera began. A new tenor, said to be a second Caruso, was singing that night. He had been referred to by the newspapers as a Yugoslav, a Czech, an Albanian, a Magyar, and a Bulgarian, with a beautiful impartiality. He had given an extraordinary concert at the Albert Hall, a program of the folk songs of his native hills, with a specially tuned orchestra. They were in strange halftones, and the would-be musical had pronounced them too marvelous. Real musicians had reserved judgment, realizing that the ear had to be specially trained and attuned before any criticism was possible. It was quite a relief to some people to find this evening that Yoshbim could sing in ordinary Italian with all the traditional sobs and quivers. The curtain went down on the first act and applause burst out vociferously. Mr. Satterthwaite turned to Mr. Quin. He realized that the latter was waiting for him to pronounce judgment, and plumed himself a little. After all, he knew As a critic, he was well-nigh infallible. Very slowly, he nodded his head. "It is the real thing," he said. "You think so?" As fine a voice as Caruso's. "People will not recognize that it is so at first, for his technique is not yet perfect. There are ragged edges, a lack of certainty in the attack. But the voice is there, magnificent." "I went to his concert at the Albert Hall," said Mr. Quin. "Did you?" "I could not go. He made a wonderful hit with a shepherd's song." "I read about it," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "The refrain ends each time with a high note, a kind of cry. A note midway between A and B flat. Very curious." Yoshbim had taken 3 calls, bowing and smiling. The lights went up and the people began to file out. Mr. Satterthwaite leant over to watch the girl with the golden head. She rose, adjusted her scarf, and turned. Mr. Satterthwaite caught his breath. There were, he knew, such faces in the world, faces that made history. The girl moved to the gangway, her companion, a young man, beside her. And Mr. Satterthwaite noticed how every man in the vicinity looked, and continued to look covertly. "Beauty," said Mr. Satterthwaite to himself. "There is such a thing. Not charm, nor attraction, nor magnetism, nor any of the things we talk about so glibly, just sheer beauty. The shape of a face, the line of an eyebrow, the curve of a jaw." He quoted softly under his breath, "The face that launched 1,000 ships." And for the first time he realized the meaning of those words. He glanced across at Mr. Quin, who was watching him in what seemed such perfect comprehension that Mr. Satterthwaite felt there was no need for words. "I've always wondered," he said simply, "what such women were really like." "You mean?" "The Helens, the Cleopatras, the Mary Stuarts." Mr. Quin nodded thoughtfully. "If we go out," he suggested, "we may see." They went out together, and their quest was successful. The pair they were in search of were seated on a lounge halfway up the staircase. For the first time, Mr. Satterthwaite noted the girl's companion, a dark young man, not handsome, but with a suggestion of restless fire about him. A face full of strange angles, jutting cheekbones, a forceful, slightly crooked jaw, deep-set eyes that were curiously light under the dark, overhanging brows. "An interesting face," said Mr. Satterthwaite to himself. "A real face. It means something." The young man was leaning forward talking earnestly. The girl was listening. Neither of them belonged to Mr. Satterthwaite's world. He took them to be of the arty class. The girl wore a rather shapeless garment of cheap green silk. Her shoes were of soiled, white satin. The young man wore his evening clothes with an air of being uncomfortable in them. The 2 men passed and repassed several times. The 4th time they did so, the couple had been joined by a third, a fair young man with a suggestion of the clerk about him. With his coming a certain tension had set in. The newcomer was fidgeting with his tie and seemed ill at ease. The girl's beautiful face was turned gravely up towards him, and her companion was scowling furiously. "The usual story," said Mr. Quin very softly as they passed. "Yes," said Mr. Satterthwaite with a sigh. "It's inevitable, I suppose. The snarling of 2 dogs over a bone. It always has been, it always will be. And yet, one could wish for something different." Beauty, he stopped. Beauty, to Mr. Satterthwaite, meant something very wonderful. He found it difficult to speak of it. He looked at Mr. Quin, who nodded his head gravely in understanding. They went back to their seats for the second act. At the close of the performance, Mr. Satterthwaite turned eagerly to his friend. "It is a wet night. My car is here. You must allow me to drive you, somewhere." The last word was Mr. Satterthwaite's delicacy coming into play. To drive you home would, he felt, have savored of curiosity. Mr. Quin had always been singularly reticent. It was extraordinary how little Mr. Satterthwaite knew about him. "But perhaps," continued the little man, "you have your own car waiting?" "No," said Mr. Quin, "I have no car waiting." Then, but Mr. Quin shook his head. "You are most kind," he said, "but I prefer to go my own way. Besides," he said with a rather curious smile, "if anything should happen, it will be for you to act. Good night, and thank you. Once again we have seen the drama together." He had gone so quickly that Mr. Satterthwaite had no time to protest. but he was left with a faint uneasiness stirring in his mind. To what drama did Mr. Quin refer? Pagliacci or another? Masters, Mr. Satterthwaite's chauffeur, was in the habit of waiting in a side street. His master disliked the long delay while the cars drew up in turn before the opera house. Now, as on previous occasions, he walked rapidly round the corner and along the street towards where he knew he should find Masters awaiting him. Just in front of him were a girl and a man, and even as he recognized them, another man joined them. It all broke out in a minute. A man's voice, angrily uplifted. Another man's voice in injured protest. And then the scuffle. Blows, angry breathing, more blows, the form of a policeman appearing majestically from nowhere, and in another minute Mr. Satterthwaite was beside the girl where she shrank back against the wall. "Allow me," he said. "You must not stay here." He took her by the arm and marshaled her swiftly down the street. Once she looked back. "Oughtn't I?" she began uncertainly. Mr. Satterthwaite shook his head. "It would be very unpleasant for you to be mixed up in it. You would probably be asked to go along to the police station with them. I am sure neither of your friends would wish that." He stopped. "This is my car. If you will allow me to do so, I shall have much pleasure in driving you home." The girl looked at him searchingly. The staid respectability of Mr. Satterthwaite impressed her favorably. She bent her head. "Thank you," she said, and got into the car, the door of which Masters was holding open. In reply to a question from Mr. Satterthwaite, she gave an address in Chelsea, and he got in beside her. The girl was upset and not in the mood for talking, and Mr. Satterthwaite was too tactful to intrude upon her thoughts. Presently, however, she turned to him and spoke of her own accord. "I wish," she said pettishly, "people wouldn't be so silly." "It is a nuisance," agreed Mr. Satterthwaite. His matter-of-fact manner put her at her ease, and she went on as though feeling the need of confiding in someone. "It wasn't as though, well, it was like this. Mr. Eastney and I have been friends for a long time, ever since I came to London. He's taken no end of trouble about my voice, and got me some very good introductions, and he's been more kind to me than I can say. He's absolutely music mad. It was very good of him to take me tonight. I'm sure he can't really afford it." And then Mr. Burns came up and spoke to us, quite nicely, I'm sure, and Phil, Mr. Eastney, got sulky about it. I don't know why he should. It's a free country, I'm sure. And Mr. Burns is always pleasant and good-tempered. Then just as we were walking to the tube, he came up and joined us, and he hadn't so much as said 2 words before Philip flew out at him like a madman. "Anne, oh, I don't like it." "Don't you?" asked Mr. Satterthwaite very softly. She blushed, but very little. There was none of the conscious siren about her. A certain measure of pleasurable excitement in being fought for there must be. That was only nature, but Mr. Satterthwaite decided that a worried perplexity lay uppermost, and he had the clue to it in another moment when she observed inconsequently, "I do hope he hasn't hurt him." Now which is him, thought Mr. Satterthwaite, smiling to himself in the darkness. He backed his own judgment and said, "You hope Mr. Eastney hasn't hurt Mr. Burns?" She nodded. "Yes, that's what I said." "It seems so dreadful. I wish I knew." The car was drawing up. "Are you on the telephone?" he asked. "Yes. If you like, I will find out exactly what has happened and then telephone to you." The girl's face brightened. "Oh, that would be very kind of you. Are you sure it's not too much bother?" "Not in the least." She thanked him again and gave him her telephone number, adding with a touch of shyness, "My name is Gillian West." As he was driven through the night, bound on his errand, a curious smile came to Mr. Satterthwaite's lips. He thought, so that is all it is, the shape of a face, the curve of a jaw. But he fulfilled his promise. The following Sunday afternoon Mr. Satterthwaite went to Kew Gardens to admire the rhododendrons. Very long ago, incredibly long ago, it seemed to Mr. Satterthwaite, he had driven down to Kew Gardens with a certain young lady to see the bluebells. Mr. Satterthwaite had arranged very carefully beforehand in his own mind exactly what he was going to say, and the precise words he would use in asking the young lady for her hand in marriage. He was just conning them over in his mind, and responding to her raptures about the bluebells a little absent-mindedly when the shock came. The young lady stopped exclaiming at the bluebells and suddenly confided in Mr. Satterthwaite as a true friend, her love for another. Mr. Satterthwaite put away the little set speech he had prepared and hastily rummaged for sympathy and friendship in the bottom drawer of his mind. Such was Mr. Satterthwaite's romance, a rather tepid early Victorian one, but it had left him with a romantic attachment to Kew Gardens, and he would often go there to see the bluebells, or, if he had been abroad later than usual, the rhododendrons, and would sigh himself, and feel rather sentimental, and really enjoy himself very much indeed in an old-fashioned, romantic way. This particular afternoon, he was strolling back past the tea houses when he recognized a couple sitting at one of the small tables on the grass. They were Gillian West and the fair young man, and at that same moment they recognized him. He saw the girl flush and speak eagerly to her companion. In another minute he was shaking hands with them both in his correct, rather prim fashion, and had accepted the shy invitation proffered him to have tea with them. "I can't tell you, sir," said Mr. Burns, "how grateful I am to you for looking after Gillian the other night. She told me all about it." "Yes, indeed," said the girl. "It was ever so kind of you." Mr. Satterthwaite felt pleased and interested in the pair. Their naivete and sincerity touched him. Also, it was to him a peep into a world with which he was not well acquainted. These people were of a class unknown to him. In his little dried-up way, Mr. Satterthwaite could be very sympathetic. Very soon he was hearing all about his new friends. He noted that Mr. Burns had become Charlie, and he was not unprepared for the statement that the two were engaged. "As a matter of fact," said Mr. Burns with refreshing candor, "it just happened this afternoon, didn't it, Gil?" Burns was a clerk in a shipping firm. He was making a fair salary, had a little money of his own, and the two proposed to be married quite soon. Mr. Satterthwaite listened and nodded and congratulated. An ordinary young man, he thought to himself, a very ordinary young man. Nice, straightforward young chap, plenty to say for himself, good opinion of himself without being conceited, nice-looking without being unduly handsome. Nothing remarkable about him and will never set the Thames on fire. And the girl loves him. Aloud he said, and Mr. Eastney, he purposely broke off, but he had said enough to produce an effect for which he was not unprepared. Charlie Burns's face darkened, and Gillian looked troubled. More than troubled, he thought. She looked afraid. "I don't like it," she said in a low voice. Her words were addressed to Mr. Satterthwaite, as though she knew by instinct that he would understand a feeling incomprehensible to her lover. "You see, he's done a lot for me. He's encouraged me to take up singing and helped me with it. But I've known all the time that my voice wasn't really good, not first class. Of course, I've had engagements." She stopped. "You've had a bit of trouble too," said Burns. "A girl wants someone to look after her. Gillian's had a lot of unpleasantness, Mr. Satterthwaite. Altogether, she's had a lot of unpleasantness. She's a good looker, as you can see, and, well, that often leads to trouble for a girl." Between them, Mr. Satterthwaite became enlightened as to various happenings which were vaguely classed by Burns under the heading of unpleasantness. A young man who had shot himself, the extraordinary conduct of a bank manager who was a married man, a violent stranger who must have been balmy, the wild behavior of an elderly artist. A trail of violence and tragedy that Gillian West had left in her wake, recited in the commonplace tones of Charles Burns. "And it's my opinion," he ended, "that this fellow Eastney is a bit cracked. Gillian would have had trouble with him if I hadn't turned up to look after her." His laugh sounded a little fatuous to Mr. Satterthwaite, and no responsive smile came to the girl's face. She was looking earnestly at Mr. Satterthwaite. "Phil's all right," she said slowly. "He cares for me, I know, and I care for him like a friend, but not anything more. I don't know how he'll take the news about Charlie, I'm sure. I'm so afraid he'll be." She stopped, inarticulate in face of the dangers she vaguely sensed. "If I can help you in any way," said Mr. Satterthwaite warmly, "pray command me." He fancied Charlie Burns looked vaguely resentful, but Gillian said at once, "Thank you." Mr. Satterthwaite left his new friends after having promised to take tea with Gillian on the following Thursday. When Thursday came, Mr. Satterthwaite felt a little thrill of pleasurable anticipation. He thought, "I'm an old man, but not too old to be thrilled by a face." A face. Then he shook his head with a sense of foreboding. Gillian was alone. Charlie Burns was to come in later. She looked much happier, Mr. Satterthwaite thought, as though a load had been lifted from her mind. Indeed, she frankly admitted as much. "I dreaded telling Phil about Charles. It was silly of me. I ought to have known Phil better. He was upset, of course, but no one could have been sweeter. Really sweet he was. Look what he sent me this morning. A wedding present. Isn't it magnificent?" It was indeed rather magnificent for a young man in Philip Eastney's circumstances. A 4-valve wireless set of the latest type. "We both love music so much, you see," explained the girl. "Phil said that when I was listening to a concert on this, I should always think of him a little. And I'm sure I shall, because we have been such friends." "You must be proud of your friend," said Mr. Satterthwaite gently. "He seems to have taken the blow like a true sportsman." Gillian nodded. He saw the quick tears come into her eyes. "He asked me to do one thing for him. Tonight is the anniversary of the day we first met. He asked me if I would stay at home quietly this evening and listen to the wireless program, not to go out with Charlie anywhere. I said, of course I would, and that I was very touched, and that I would think of him with a lot of gratitude and affection." Mr. Satterthwaite nodded, but he was puzzled. He was seldom at fault in his delineation of character, and he would have judged Philip Eastney quite incapable of such a sentimental request. The young man must be of a more banal order than he supposed. Gillian evidently thought the idea quite in keeping with her rejected lover's character. Mr. Satterthwaite was a little, just a little, disappointed. He was sentimental himself and knew it, but he expected better things of the rest of the world. Besides, sentiment belonged to his age. It had no part to play in the modern world. He asked Gillian to sing, and she complied. He told her voice was charming, but he knew quite well in his own mind that it was distinctly second class. Any success that could have come to her in the profession she had adopted would have been won by her face, not her voice. He was not particularly anxious to see young Burns again, so presently he rose to go. It was at that moment that his attention was attracted by an ornament on the mantelpiece, which stood out among the other rather gimcrack objects like a jewel on a dust heap. It was a curving beaker of thin green glass, long-stemmed and graceful, and poised on the edge of it was what looked like a gigantic soap bubble, a ball of iridescent glass. Gillian noticed his absorption. "That's an extra wedding present from Phil. It's rather pretty, I think. He works in a sort of glass factory." "It is a beautiful thing," said Mr. Satterthwaite reverently. The glass blowers of Murano might have been proud of that. He went away with his interest in Philip Eastney strangely stimulated. An extraordinarily interesting young man. And yet the girl with the wonderful face preferred Charlie Burns. What a strange and inscrutable universe. It had just occurred to Mr. Satterthwaite that, owing to the remarkable beauty of Gillian West, his evening with Mr. Quin had somehow missed fire. As a rule, every meeting with that mysterious individual had resulted in some strange and unforeseen happening. It was with the hope of perhaps running against the man of mystery that Mr. Satterthwaite bent his steps towards the Arlecchino restaurant where once, in the days gone by, he had met Mr. Quin, and which Mr. Quin had said he often frequented. Mr. Satterthwaite went from room to room at the Arlecchino, looking hopefully about him, but there was no sign of Mr. Quin's dark, smiling face. There was, however, somebody else. Sitting at a small table alone was Philip Eastney. The place was crowded, and Mr. Satterthwaite took his seat opposite the young man. He felt a sudden strange sense of exultation, as though he were caught up, and made part of a shimmering pattern of events. He was in this thing, whatever it was. He knew now what Mr. Quin had meant that evening at the opera. There was a drama going on, and in it was a part, an important part, for Mr. Satterthwaite. He must not fail to take his cue and speak his lines. He sat down opposite Philip Eastney with the sense of accomplishing the inevitable. It was easy enough to get into conversation. Eastney seemed anxious to talk. Mr. Satterthwaite was, as always, an encouraging and sympathetic listener. They talked of the war, of explosives, of poison gases. Eastney had a lot to say about these last, for during the greater part of the war he had been engaged in their manufacture. Mr. Satterthwaite found him really interesting. There was one gas, Eastney said, that had never been tried. The armistice had come too soon. Great things had been hoped for it. One whiff of it was deadly. He warmed to animation as he spoke. Having broken the ice, Mr. Satterthwaite gently turned the conversation to music. Eastney's thin face lit up. He spoke with the passion and abandon of the real music lover. They discussed Yoshbim, and the young man was enthusiastic. Both he and Mr. Satterthwaite agreed that nothing on earth could surpass a really fine tenor voice. Eastney as a boy had heard Caruso, and he had never forgotten it. "Do you know that he could sing to a wine glass and shatter it?" he demanded. "I always thought that was a fable," said Mr. Satterthwaite, smiling. "No, it's gospel truth, I believe. The thing's quite possible. It's a question of resonance." He went off into technical details. His face was flushed and his eyes shone. The subject seemed to fascinate him, and Mr. Satterthwaite noted that he seemed to have a thorough grasp of what he was talking about. The elder man realized that he was talking to an exceptional brain, a brain that might almost be described as that of a genius. Brilliant, erratic, undecided as yet as to the true channel to give it outlet, but undoubtedly genius. And he thought of Charlie Burns and wondered at Gillian West. It was with quite a start that he realized how late it was getting, and he called for his bill. Eastney looked slightly apologetic. "I'm ashamed of myself, running on so," he said. "But it was a lucky chance sent you along here tonight. I needed someone to talk to this evening." He ended his speech with a curious little laugh. His eyes were still blazing with some subdued excitement. Yet there was something tragic about him. "It has been quite a pleasure," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "Our conversation has been most interesting and instructive to me." He then made his funny, courteous little bow and passed out of the restaurant. The night was a warm one, and as he walked slowly down the street, a very odd fancy came to him. He had the feeling that he was not alone, that someone was walking by his side. In vain he told himself that the idea was a delusion. It persisted. Someone was walking beside him down that dark, quiet street. Someone whom he could not see. He wondered what it was that brought the figure of Mr. Quin so clearly before his mind. He felt exactly as though Mr. Quin were there walking beside him, and yet he had only to use his eyes to assure himself that it was not so, that he was alone. But the thought of Mr. Quin persisted, and with it came something else, a need, an urgency of some kind, an oppressive foreboding of calamity. There was something he must do, and do quickly. There was something very wrong, and it lay in his hands to put it right. So strong was the feeling that Mr. Satterthwaite forbore to fight against it. Instead, he shut his eyes and tried to bring that mental image of Mr. Quin nearer. If he could only have asked Mr. Quin, but even as the thought flashed through his mind, he knew it was wrong. It was never any use asking Mr. Quin anything. "The threads are all in your hands," that was the kind of thing Mr. Quin would say. The threads. Threads of what? He analyzed his own feeling and impressions carefully. That presentiment of danger now. Whom did it threaten? At once a picture rose up before his eyes, the picture of Gillian West sitting alone listening to the wireless. Mr. Satterthwaite flung a penny to a passing newspaper boy and snatched at a paper. He turned at once to the London radio program. Yoshbim was broadcasting tonight, he noted with interest. He was singing Salve d'Amore from Faust and afterwards a selection of his folk songs. The shepherd's song, the fish, the little deer, etc. Mr. Satterthwaite crumpled the paper together. The knowledge of what Gillian was listening to seemed to make the picture of her clearer. Sitting there alone. An odd request, that of Philip Eastney's. Not like the man, not like him at all. There was no sentimentality in Eastney. He was a man of violent feeling, a dangerous man, perhaps. Again his thought brought up with a jerk. A dangerous man, that meant something. The threads are all in your hands. That meeting with Philip Eastney. Tonight. Rather odd. A lucky chance, Isne had said. Was it chance? Or was it part of that interwoven design of which Mr. Satterthwaite had once or twice been conscious this evening? He cast his mind back. There must be something in Isne's conversation, some clue there. There must, or else why this strange feeling of urgency? What had he talked about? Singing, war work, Caruso. Caruso. Mr. Satterthwaite's thoughts went off at a tangent. Yoshbim's voice was very nearly equal to that of Caruso. Jillian would be sitting listening to it. Now as it rang out true and powerful, echoing round the room, setting glasses ringing, he caught his breath. Glasses ringing. Caruso, singing to a wine glass and the wine glass breaking. Yochbim singing in the London studio and in a room over a mile away, the crash and tinkle of glass, not a wine glass, a thin, green, glass beaker. A crystal soap bubble falling, a soap bubble that perhaps was not empty. It was at that moment that Mr. Satterthwaite, as judged by passers-by, suddenly went mad. He tore open the newspaper once more, took a brief glance at the wireless announcements, and then began to run for his life down the quiet street. At the end of it, he found a crawling taxi, and jumping into it, he yelled an address to the driver and the information that it was life or death to get there quickly. The driver, judging him mentally afflicted but rich, did his utmost. Mr. Satterthwaite lay back, his head a jumble of fragmentary thoughts. Forgotten bits of science learned at school, phrases used by Isne that night. Resonance. Natural periods. If the period of the force coincides with the natural period, there was something about a suspension bridge, soldiers marching over it and the swing of their stride being the same as the period of the bridge. Isne had studied the subject. Isne knew. And Isne was a genius. At 10:45 Yoshbim was to broadcast. It was that now. Yes, but the Faust had to come first. It was the shepherd song, with the great shout after the refrain that would, do what? His mind went whirling round again. Tones, overtones, half-tones. He didn't know much about these things, but Isne knew. Pray heaven he would be in time. The taxi stopped. Mr. Satterthwaite flung himself out and raced up the stone stairs to his second floor like a young athlete. The door of the flat was ajar. He pushed it open and the great tenor voice welcomed him. The words of the shepherd's song were familiar to him in a less unconventional setting. Shepherd, see they horses flowing mane. He was in time then. He burst open the sitting-room door. Jillian was sitting there in a tall chair by the fireplace. Baramisha's daughter is to wed today. To the wedding I must haste away. She must have thought him mad. He clutched at her, crying out something incomprehensible, and half pulled, half dragged her out till they stood upon the stairway. To the wedding I must haste away, yaha. A wonderful high note, full-throated, powerful, hit full in the middle, a note any singer might be proud of. And with it another sound, the faint tinkle of broken glass. A stray cat darted past them and in through the flat door. Jillian made a movement, but Mr. Satterthwaite held her back, speaking incoherently. No, it's deadly, no smell, nothing to warn you. A mere whiff and it's all over. Nobody knows quite how deadly it would be. It's unlike anything that's ever been tried before. He was repeating the things that Philip Isne had told him over the table at dinner. Jillian stared at him uncomprehendingly. 3. Philip Isne drew out his watch and looked at it. It was just 11:30. For the past 3/4 of an hour, he had been pacing up and down the embankment. He looked out over the Thames and then turned to look into the face of his dinner companion. That's odd, he said, and laughed. We seem fated to run into each other tonight. If you call it fate, said Mr. Satterthwaite. Philip Isne looked at him more attentively and his own expression changed. Yes, he said quietly. Mr. Satterthwaite went straight to the point. I have just come from Miss West's flat. Yes. The same voice with the same deadly quiet. We have taken a dead cat out of it. There was silence, then Isne said, Who are you? Mr. Satterthwaite spoke for some time. He recited the whole history of events. So you see, I was in time, he ended up. He paused and added quite gently, Have you anything to say? He expected something, some outburst, some wild justification. but nothing came. No, said Philip Eastney quietly, and turned on his heel and walked away. Mr. Satterthwaite looked after him till his figure was swallowed up in the gloom. In spite of himself, he had a strange fellow feeling for Eastney, the feeling of an artist for another artist, of a sentimentalist for a real lover, of a plain man for a genius. At last he roused himself with a start and began to walk in the same direction as Eastney. A fog was beginning to come up. Presently he met a policeman who looked at him suspiciously. "Did you hear a kind of splash just now?" asked the policeman. "No," said Mr. Satterthwaite. The policeman was peering out over the river. "Another of these suicides, I expect," he grunted disconsolately. "They will do it." "I suppose," said Mr. Satterthwaite, "that they have their reasons." "Money, mostly," said the policeman. "Sometimes it's a woman," he said, as he prepared to move away. "It's not always their fault, but some women cause a lot of trouble." "Some women," agreed Mr. Satterthwaite softly. When the policeman had gone on, he sat down on a seat with the fog coming up all around him and thought about Helen of Troy and wondered if she were a nice, ordinary woman, blessed or cursed with a wonderful face.